So, Season 4 and 5 of The Wire. You may ask, why are you doing both in one video? Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, when I finished Season 4, I jumped straight into Season 5 without taking a break to review the penultimate season. So I'm a little muddled with some of the more minor details with what happens in Season 4 and what happens in Season 5. It was just that I was so interested in seeing where it was all going that I didn't take a break. There was also a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about in future videos, so I wanted to get the season reviews out of the way short and sweet. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for upcoming analysis on The Wire, much like how I do with The Sopranos. I also lost my discipline in other ways too. I got the urge to re-watch certain scenes on YouTube, and while I was doing so, I was scrolling through the comment section seeing what people were saying, which of course is a big no-no if you haven't finished the show yet, and surprise surprise, quite stupidly I spoiled a lot of stuff for myself. Really cathartic moments of the show too. I mean, I'm really well drilled when it comes to avoiding spoilers, but I succumbed to temptation on this one unfortunately, and I guess you can chalk it up to the brilliance of The Wire that it made me do so. And bizarrely, I don't know how I did this, but I actually managed to miss an entire episode. Yeah, Season 5, Episode 2. And I guess watching YouTube clips ended up being a blessing in disguise because I came across one where Avon and Marlo meet, and I was literally on the last episode of the show thinking, how come these two haven't met yet? So I went back and checked, and lo and behold, I had skipped past such a great episode. It's funny though, because I jumped an hour forward into the show, but it didn't feel like I missed much, apart from obviously brilliant scenes like the Marlo-Avon meeting. For example, there's a scene with Bubs, who is now working at a kind of food distribution thing for the homeless, and he washes the dishes there, not wanting to handle the food because he thinks he might have AIDS or something. And then he actually goes and does the test. The whole thing about the food and the dishes isn't actually said though, it's just implied. It's something you get from the acting and the way the scene is set up. But in episode 2, they pretty much spell it out through the dialogue, so it's almost as if that exposition in season 2 wasn't even needed. Such is the brilliance of the characterization in The Wire that it's common to know what characters are thinking without them actually saying it. And also, during the meeting with Marlo, Avon lets him know that he knows he's looking to cut Proposition Joe out of the way while taking over his operations. And because I didn't know this, as I missed the episode, it was even more of a shock to me than it might have been to most when Marlo, who was taken under Prop Joe's wing, eventually betrays the old man. Sad stuff. And very interesting how missing an episode changed my perspective of certain plot threads. Anyway, I'm looking to keep this short and sweet because there are more Wire videos on the way in much more detail, but Season 4 picks up after the incredible events of Season 3. I can't believe they killed off Stringer Bell and then sent Avon back to prison where he now is pretty much a non-character, completely out of the story, leading the young, cold, intimidating Marlo to easily eat up the Barksdale's territories. Shows like Game of Thrones have done similar things, but in killing off your most interesting characters, you run the risk of having boring side characters having to take up the mantle in main roles. Not so with The Wire, however, as one could argue that this is where the story, with regards to the streets, really gets interesting. There's a ghostly atmosphere on the streets of West Baltimore in Season 4. For one, with the Barksdales, it's pretty much just Bodie standing on a corner, as everything else has been eaten up by Marlo. Always had a soft spot for Bodie myself, sad what happens to him. But you've got him there, Slim Charles has gone over to Prop Joe, and not to mention the sinister duo of Chris and Snoop. People disappear on the streets all of the time, but the cops are dumbfounded as there's no bodies. And that's because Marlo, who is essentially the new big bad guy of The Wire, has Chris and Snoop dispose of the bodies in vacant properties where no one has any reason to enter. It's an oft-repeated sight, Chris and Snoop in the middle of the night ghostly ambling their way to their next victim, leading him to a vacant after which he'll never be seen again. Spooky. And because of the lack of bodies and cuts to the police, the cops, after initially making some headway, have their resources cut to bare bones. The new focus in Season 4 is the educational system, and how it's a cycle of failure for the inner city kids. This new angle is mainly told from Presbolowski, the poor sod who is now a teacher. As a former teacher of inner city kids, I had a lot of fun with Season 4. Mine weren't shanking each other in class, but I could relate to a lot of the issues both the teachers and the kids have, such as, for example, classes being geared to passing the end of grade standardized tests as opposed to actually developing the children. Similar things are going on in the policing world and the political world in The Wire. I've got some major problems with state-funded schools where I live, in the UK, which I mentioned in my book review of John Gatto's Dumbing Us Down, available to channel members, and I was delighted how many of these issues were actually echoed in Season 4 of The Wire. The kids that were the focus of Season 4 were great. The acting on display was brilliant. They really felt like real kids, and the youngsters on the show displayed a wide array of emotions. It's a risky move, pushing aside the likes of Stringer, Avon, and even McNulty, who's hardly in this season as he settled down with Beatty. The real reason, I think, is because the actor wanted to spend time with his family. But the kids are the principal focus. Guys like the annoying Namond, who clearly tries to act like a big gangster when you can tell that he really isn't all that. But then you see who his mother is, this terrifying woman who pushes him to become a better drug dealer, who goes to the likes of Bodhi to get her son better opportunities on the street, much how a normal parent might go to a principal or a teacher to get their son to do better in school. And then you see who his father is, and it's Weebay from the original Barksdale crew. So then you start feeling sorry for the kid and you realize that, what kind of hope does this guy have? But anyway, there's also the likes of the intelligent Duquan and little old Randy with his beautiful smile. It's devastating where some of these characters end up, and part of the entire point of the show is that Baltimore is an endless cycle where nothing ultimately changes. And part of the brilliance is that you can actually see over the course of entire seasons the younger characters turning into the already established ones, and you get an idea of what some of the principal characters would have been like when they were younger. Duquan might become the next Bubbles, for example, Michael the next Omar or Chris, and this is an element present in other storylines too, like Carcetti and his campaign to become mayor. I found him a little boring in Season 3 as I mentioned, but I found him much more interesting as a character in Season 4 and 5, and it's cool but frustrating seeing this young idealist worn down by the politics and shit from his new environment, and eventually getting to a stage where there isn't that much difference between him and the previous mayor. He has to play the game, he has to compromise, again highlighting the never-ending cycle where nothing ultimately changes. It was truly an incredible season, on par with the third, and the fifth was great also, but a little weird because we follow McNulty, who comes up with an insane plan amid budget cuts to pretend there's a serial killer on the loose, so the media catches on to the sensationalism of it all, and the mayor is forced to pump money into the investigation, which McNulty uses for the Marlowe investigation. There's a Kafkaesque quality to this plot, a whiff of classic noir, something Alfred Hitchcock might have done as one of his more minor comedic movies. It's something you might see in a comedy movie today. Simultaneously, a journalist at a paper is making things up to boost his career, with the two liars, McNulty and Scott, having their stories intertwine. It really is entertaining stuff, but it doesn't quite have the suspense of other plots, or Season 4, because of course we know ultimately there is nothing behind these stories. Maybe it's a commentary on something. I think Season 4 was when I started to notice a lot of the recurring catchphrases. The pick of the bunch being Senator Clay Davis's hilarious shit. I was looking it up online and went through an entertaining rabbit hole with it. Apparently it's the actor's thing. He does it in a load of Spike Lee movies and even has a talking shit bubblehead he sells. I just wanted to also mention, I know it's weird because of all the things to praise The Wire, I go with this, but I love the way a lot of the characters talk in this show. Something about the voices of the likes of Lester, Burrell, Prop Joe, Slim Charles and others is so soothing, and then you have this delicious dialogue they are given to chew on. It's beautiful. Another magnificent aspect of The Wire is the ability to maintain each character's storyline and occasionally have them overlap and spill into each other with entertaining consequences. Each plot is, however obscurely, related to the next, with you coming away realizing that there is no real main character in The Wire, and instead a larger narrative is being woven, where the main character is actually Baltimore itself. Sometimes the characters themselves acknowledge the weirdness and surrealness of these moments where the stories overlap, like a hilarious couple of seconds in a school where Persblowski and Bubbles see each other, each with an incredulous look of, "What the heck are you doing here?" on their faces. Like I said, I'm not going into too much detail here as I want to do that in future videos, but to summarize my thoughts on The Wire, especially the final 2 seasons which I've just watched, is that the show is absolutely brilliant. There is so much depth to the characters and the lines. It's a timeless story, relatable, gritty and brutally honest, garnished with Greek tragedy, and the system itself being the one true villain of the show. The world building is stupendous. There's even a character called Dee who has an incredible, almost hidden story arc over the course of the show despite being in only 3 scenes over 3 seasons. Baltimore feels alive. It feels like this sick chasm that is dangling all of these characters on a thread like puppets, cutting them off as it so chooses, but not before giving them hope that change will come, a better time will come. The system of Baltimore governance, the police departments, and the gangs on the streets are all mirrors of each other. They are practically identical, and the beauty, the irony, the poetry of it all is that it only really becomes apparent when you finish the show, sit back and give it a good old think. In some ways I can understand why the show didn't get a lot of traction from award shows during its run, because it's only after it's over you can truly appreciate its brilliance. The best show ever made? It could very well be, though I'm not going to go into that here. Honestly, I think they could have continued going. I know there was talk of a 6th season, and there were issues behind the scenes with the show getting cancelled after a couple of seasons and the final season being cut short, but there's still so much more left to explore, given how amazing the world building was. I wonder if they could have done maybe a season focusing on the prisons, and the politics that come along with that. The abuse, the focus on punishment as opposed to rehabilitation, inequality when it comes to the length of prison sentences, and how prisons are also a money-making scheme. Maybe The Wire didn't want to tackle stuff perhaps already explored by other HBO shows, such as Oz, which I haven't seen, so I don't know. But I would have loved a prison-orientated season. Anyway, The Wire gets a 10 out of 10 for me, an A-star show which offers so much. I will definitely be making analysis videos on this series as it's one I really want to sink my teeth into. So if you want to be notified, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date. And thanks for watching.